What's up, guys? I hope you guys are passionate and love talking about Black businesses and Black entrepreneurship because that's what we're talking about today. So if you're not, this is not the talk for you. So you guys skedaddle, if you know what I'm saying. Anyway, like I was saying, I'm very passionate about this stuff. My dad's an entrepreneur. I want to be an entrepreneur when I grow up and learn about the history of it. Teaches me our origins and will only make me better so I don't make the mistakes and I can do the right things that they did in today's time. So let's get into it. Share my screen. Okay, cool. So hold on. I titled my I titled my um my presentation Roots of Resilience because we're talking about the origin of our work ethic and how hard we work, even though we've been put down our whole lives. To this day, from Africa in the 17th century to this day, we've been put down and have had to work harder than everybody to be successful. So first, let's talk about me. My name is Dave Martin Jr. I'm a sophomore business administration student from Wilmington, Delaware. I love football. I love sports. I love baseball, but I also love math and I love figuring stuff out, problem solving. And that's kind of why I'm a business administration student because I like to problem solve. I like to figure stuff out. I like to come up with something new. So that's where my mindset is. And again, reading this book is going to help me learn from the greats. So first, when we're talking about the history of Black businesses, we gotta go all the way back to the 1600s, 17th century, and pre-colonial African markets is where it really started. So in West Central Africa, they had pre-colonial African markets where they would sell things like cotton, elephant teeth, and European wear. Men were usually the merchants and traders, whereas women, they would sometimes work in these settings, but it would be in a larger market sense and they would just be merchants. And there was huge entertainment in these market lives. So I could only imagine how fun it would be back then in that setting. Also, there was two types of international trade between countries. There would be long distance trade carried out by merchants from stranger nations, like the Hausa, Mande, Masik, Nakani, and then long distance trade with middleman nations. A lot of conflict will happen with this because it's kind of like beef, like two different countries meeting up in the middle and they don't like each other. They trying to sell more than the other. So a lot of conflict will happen in that situation. Trading organizations were also a big thing in pre-colonial Africa, West and West Central Africa. There was two main tribes, the Akani and the Asante. The Akani, they were known for their gold mining and being able to trade their gold with a lot of different countries. Whereas the Asante, they were the more militaristic ones, which at first they were selling slaves at first, and then they ended up selling guns. And yeah, but the Akani was more like a monopoly, and like they were the bigger ones. They was the Apple, whereas the Asante, they were still good, but they was like Microsoft. They wasn't as up on top. Craft and merchant guilds were huge back in the 16th century. Craft and merchant guilds were organized groups that played crucial roles in economic, social, and political life in those regions. Artisans were huge. They would be making different pottery, different household items that you just needed every day to use because like everybody just needs an artisan today and back then. Iron was a big metal that they used. They made a lot of iron and they used it in a lot of the things that they had to make. Guild membership was usually determined by household and kinship groups, and craft production met household needs, satisfied local market demands, and allowed for trade in long distance markets to secure items not produced locally. The Africans' cooperative work ethic was insane back then, and you could tell just from now that we got it from back then. So we treated each other as one family, saying that they created mutual aid societies and saving organizations to help each other out. They also participated in communal activities such as roofing a house and building compounds. They did all this stuff to help each other out just in case somebody was in need. And we look at it today as we do a lot of things knowing black people in America aren't treated right. So we gotta act as in one. We got to be able to survive. Women in production and trade, woman was usually in four levels of the economy: agricultural production, cottage industry, craft manufacturing, market commodity trading, and common labor, which is honestly pretty surprising because we think of women now today, the stereotype is for women to be in the kitchen, women to be cooking and cleaning. Whereas women, they strong too. We know black women strong. We just know that. So they get it from back in the 17th century where they was outside working with us men, doing all the hard manual labor, just like we are, just like black men stereotypically are now. One big thing that they create or they produce was cola nuts, but they also produce shea butter, palm oil, flour ground from maize, and millet, and a lot more other stuff. Taxation and exchange media was honestly just like it is today, or not just like it, but it was pretty similar. Taxes and fees were based off the value of goods transported, which makes sense. And they use cowrie shells and iron as monetary value or systems. Cowrie shells because of how rare and how hard to replicate they are, and iron because iron was just a huge thing in pre-colonial Africa. So one of the biggest myths in the history of our people is that we were stolen by the Europeans and sold. That's not true. The truth is, the hierarchy of Africans sold slaves to the Europeans to be sold again to slavery. Europeans were not allowed to come to Africa freely. Africans traded slaves for war power and guns. That's what happened. We wanted war power. We wanted guns to be able to protect ourselves, not knowing that, or ending up that these black people ended up being slaves in America. The transatlantic slave trade began in 1444 with the shipment of 235 Africans taken directly from the Guinea coast to Portugal, where they were sold into slavery. 5 million died within 1 year of capture, and 9 million became slaves in the New World, and that number only kept growing. So once we got to Africa, our marketing and our strategy didn't stop there. Like that's what people don't understand. Like we still knew how to hustle. We still that came from back then, back in the 17th century. We always knew how to hustle. The first Africans at Jamestown were company men and women, just like the whites. So they knew how to sell stuff. They knew how to be an entrepreneur. West and West Central Africans had occupational diversity and agricultural experience along with work ethic, which made them like which made people really want to hire and have them work for them because they always work the hardest. Africans from the Gold Coast were preferred by the New England and South Carolina. They were in demand because their reputation for vigor and intelligence. Again, black people working hard, vigorously, and they smart. Also in Louisiana, we were actually the first cowboys, like you said. Um, Colonial African American slave provision grounds were huge. A very important, not talked about enough topic in slavery. When when we're taught slavery, we don't get taught this, and I feel like it's very important, and I'm glad I learned about it because slaves were given in a lot of plot of land to be able to grow their surplus of commodities and be able to sell it to make money to try and buy themselves out of slavery. Most, probably 95% of them, didn't get there, but they would sell it to a lot of different people, including their own slave owners, different companies. They would sell their surplus of whatever they was making, cotton, corn, whatever they was making, they was trying to sell it if they made a lot of it to be able to buy themselves off the plantation. Slave property ownership, again, they own these provision grounds. And they were allowed to under the form called Prochinami. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. And that was basically a law be allowing them to own it. So the ones that were able to become free blacks and be able to purchase out of slavery, The five ways they were able to get their own property because they weren't equal to whites. They were still black, so they had a lot of things going against them. But the five ways that Africans acquired property was they purchased it, head rights system, and land grants, which was basically again, they had to buy an indentured servant, and by doing that, they were granted a allotted amount of um acres of land, leaseholds, private land grants, gifts, and inheritance. And then black jobs. Black jobs like the big were like a huge talk a couple months ago with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. But it was actually an important thing back in slavery times and pre-colonial America. Um, one black job was being a craftsman. That was like the upper echelon black job. That's what everybody wanted to be. But there was also artisans, chefs, barbers, wig makers, hairdressers, shopkeepers, and merchants. Artisans, merchants, and shopkeepers, just like back in pre-colonial Africa, learning from what we did generations before. So to wrap it up, to wrap it up, we have a history and we have to learn from our history and understand our history that yeah, it was rough, but we always had that heart, we always had that vigor and intelligence, we always had that dog in us that we weren't just gonna be suppressed. We was gonna get out of that. We was gonna buy our way out of slavery. We was gonna be Black Sam. We was gonna be Black Sam who was the chef for George Washington. We wasn't just falling for we're gonna be slaves, we're gonna be under you. Nah, that's not us, and it never was. Thank you for listening. Dave Martin Jr. out.